All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining tonight's program prep webinar, where we'll talk about host families, schools, visas, and we want to make sure that we are available for the many questions you probably have. My name is Parker Allen. I'm the director of our study abroad programs here at AFS-USA. And I'm also joined by my colleague Aaron, and we'll introduce ourselves in just one moment. But I want to thank you all for joining for tonight's webinar. It will be a little over an hour long. We want to make sure we're cognizant of your time. But wherever you are, wherever you're going, welcome. We're really excited to connect with you. So a couple housekeeping tips. If you haven't already, we recommend that you rename yourself in Zoom and add the host country that your host country that you'll be going to. Aaron and I will be doing lots of talking. We will certainly say too much. We will certainly say too little. But we very much love your questions. So please include them in the chat or raise your hand to unmute. We will have a couple sections for questions throughout tonight's webinar. So we'll get to those questions to the best of our ability when we can. Additionally, this webinar will cover information about AFS programming to all of our countries for both semester, trimester, and year. But it won't necessarily focus on country specifics per se. Aaron and I will do our best to speak about that. But as a general overall message, it will speak mostly generally as well. And last, we encourage you to turn on your video. We encourage you to connect with each other during the call as well, because we really want to kind of welcome the AFS class of 2026 that you currently are. So we met last week. My name is Parker Allen. I'm the director of study abroad, and I think about my experiences in South Korea and Portugal every single day. But you've already heard about me. I am also joined by my colleague Aaron. So, Aaron, would you like to introduce us and also then introduce the study abroad team who we've been working with so far?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Erin. I'm a study abroad specialist here with AFS. I work a lot with programs to Europe, like in France, Spain, Germany, also a handful of others. It's really good to see a lot of familiar faces and new names as well. Um, I've been at AFS for almost 5 years. I had the opportunity to study abroad in France. So those were really great experiences that led me to AFS and to my job here. And then I just want to briefly show the rest of our team. A lot of you have been working with Jennifer or Carly. And then we also have Sarah and Adriana, who are visa and scholarship specialists. And then we have Caitlin, who is our director. And just to briefly touch on kind of what we're going to focus on tonight. We're going to definitely be covering a lot of content. There's gonna be a lot of talking at you, but we'll also have some room for discussion and open it up for you to talk as well. So we'll be covering some important resources, materials, kind of host family and school expectations, what support looks like on program, and kind of some tips for language acquisition on program. We'll go over some travel and visa logistics. Basically, we're going through everything that you can expect now up until your day of departure. And of course, we'll also have lots of time for questions at the end as well. So just to get us started, if you want to say hi in the chat, you can share your name, where you're going, if you have any fun facts about the country you're going to, it'd be great. I'm going to keep talking on the next slide, but if you want to go ahead and introduce yourselves in the chat while I'm talking, feel free to go ahead and say hi to everyone. All right, and so first, before we get started, we just wanted to first congratulate you on your acceptance to AFS and choosing such an important, meaningful experience. We hope that, this will be a transformative experience for you and that you'll be able to gain a couple important different skills by participating in our programs, such as like personal transformation. We hope that this will be a transformative experience that will challenge you and it will also lead to valuable personal growth. We hope that you'll gain communication skills, which will help you learn to listen and connect across different cultures and languages. And we hope that you will gain some intercultural communication and understanding, meaning that you can reflect on your own values and see the world through a new perspective. And finally, we'll help you to will develop, global citizen skills and global awareness so that you'll have the be able to develop empathy and comfort in cross-cultural spaces. Um, so those are just some of the learning goals that we have for you by participating in our programs. And well, we can move into some more nitty-gritty stuff now. So just to briefly center where we are in the journey. So everyone here on this call has been, accepted into AFS. They've completed the application. So now we're in the preparation phase. So in the 1 to 3 months before departure, we're working on orientations, travel logistics, getting the host family information, completing the online PDO and student learning journey, um, and just preparing for that experience in general. So that's kind of what we're leading up to right now is that departure day.
All right. So, as Aaron just was able to kind of provide some context for where we are right now, you saw that in the 1 to 3 months before your departure, a lot happened. So, one of those things that we really want to emphasize as a large part of your pre-departure experience is connecting with available resources. So, on your AFS dashboard, so in your application, you'll see a few buttons that link you to some important items. So we really recommend that you review them. They're also sent to you as a message in your AFS application. But if you click into there, you'll find booklets from your host country. You'll find details that are really important. So although they might be big booklets, they're really worth reading and paying attention to because those will be some of your best resources for getting an understanding about the country, what to pack, and things that will be relevant to where you are right now to make sure that you're well prepared. So, one of the best things that you can be doing right now is reviewing those travel resources. And if you have questions about those, we are here to be a resource for you. Another resource that we have is displayed here on the screen. We call it the AFS Help in Learning, which is effectively your participation guide from AFS, but it's designed to be a searchable platform for you and your family to allow you to quickly find an answer to your question. So if you search banking or money or something like that, there'll be questions that we have relevant to, what our recommendation is for banking or money. Um, so we recommend that you review it into its entirety. You can also just click the chronology before you depart, during your stay, or when you return as general sections to flip through. And then if you click on country resources, you'll also see more resources based on your specific country. So here is what that looks like. So this is where you'll find country-specific guidebooks, language recommendation, and general cultural information. So we're emphasizing this because the more you put into learning about your country and you're in your host culture right now, the more you'll get out of your program. So that's really the number one thing that you can do right now is to develop that insatiable sense of curiosity for your country. So you want to just get curious, and this is a way to maybe find out something they didn't know and, dig a little deeper. What's the next step? So I would say that small factoids can go a long way in impressing the people of the host country and really deepening your experience. So, do you know what your local soccer team is? Do you know what the most popular soccer team is? Do you know who the rivals are of that soccer team? These can be really good ways of making friends and connecting with your host family. What is figuring out what the favorite food is of that country, and trying to learn a little bit more about that can be a really great way to be an icebreaker. And I very much encourage you to learn about the country's history and its culture. And this is where we very much encourage you to do so. So there's also movies and documentaries that you can watch as a family. There's some books that you can read. So anything that strikes your curiosity, we recommend you pursue. So even if it becomes very, very focused, it can still mean a lot to deepening your experience or providing kind of that icebreaker to the people of your host country. So next, we're going to talk about the host family experience, because it is one of those really important parts of the AFS experiences, connecting with the people of the country. So Aaron, I'm going to hand it back to you to chat a little bit more about our AFS host families.
So yeah, as Parker just mentioned, like the host family experience is really a core component of our programs, and living with the host family, um, um, and is which is an experience that we hope will be kind of a lasting impact that really gives students the, ability to fully immerse themselves in the culture of their host country. So once a student is accepted into the program, that is when the host family or the host partner will start searching for a host family. Once a host family is found, we will share this information with you. You'll get an email, and the information will also appear on your AFS dashboard. So you'll get the name, contact information of the host family, as well as a host family packet and photos with more information about the host family. Um, Most students will receive the host family information about a month from departure. It does take time for us to find and vet the host families. If we do have that information before, we will send it to you as soon as we receive it. Um, AFS, we find host families in a variety of different manners. All host families are vetted by the host partner, and they have to go through a application and interview process similar to what you had to go through. Um, and once they've been fully screened, they'll select a student that they would like to host by reviewing some of the application materials that you submitted. Um, we recruit host families in a wide variety of manners. Some of them are existing volunteers or host families, but we also do connect through social marketing, word of mouth, connections with schools and the community. There's a lot of different ways that we can find a host family for students. Um, just wanted to share a couple tips for the host family before. So once you do receive that host family information, you should contact the host family within 1 to 2 weeks. It is our expectation that the student is supposed to be the one that reaches out first to the host family. So your host family is usually waiting to hear from you. Um, you should think about a gift that you would want to bring for your host family. It doesn't need to be anything super big or expensive, but it is nice to bring a small item to share with your host family. I usually would recommend something that represents your home culture, culture here in the US, or your from your like, home state. Um, like food can be a good gift, magnets, t-shirts, stuff like that. Those are all good small gifts that you could consider giving. Um, and then finally, just continue to learn more once you do have that host family information, continue to research and learn more about um, your host country to think of like things you can ask the host family about, what their life is like um, and think ways for you to kind of build a bridge with them. During the program, we will kind of be hosting a bit more of a conversation about this soon, but we want you to stay engaged with your host family by participating in activities with the family. Your host family is a volunteer, so that means that they are choosing to host you because they genuinely, want to get to know you and learn about your culture. Um, so your host family does genuinely want to get to know you. And finally, just important to remember that every host family experience is unique and every family is different and every host family is going to look different as well.
Awesome. And I'll just add, I know that sometimes just the packing process can take up a lot of your mental space. And so just to emphasize that, the best gifts aren't necessarily ones that are expensive. They're the ones that are able to tell a story. So as opposed to, giving a Statue of Liberty or something, which would be perfectly good as a gift. What's maybe a local mascot? What's even more local? If you are, if you're in Maine, or maybe something that's lobster or maple syrup, something like that, that's like representative of your state, and can kind of tell a story. So that would be a perspective to share as you think about any host family gifts. And I'd also invite you in the chat, if you're thinking about gifts, please, inspire others on the call, maybe share what you're thinking. I always think that those are great. I'll also add that anything that can allow you to share that story. So your host family will want to see things that you might think are boring. A photo of your school, a photo of the street that you live on. It will be really interesting to them to see what is your life like, because you can kind of help them understand, where you're coming from and things that you're passionate about as well. So think about things that you can use to kind of break the ice in those first couple of weeks with your host family, because they will be really curious about you. Do you really read? Are yellow school buses really a thing in the United States? And yeah, they are. I would really recommend kind of painting that story, describing what you love about your home, and kind of working from there. Um, our next question or actually, Aaron, there's a couple more thoughts about the host family dynamics. So, Aaron, I'll pass it back to you, and we can chat more about what a host family looks like.
Yeah, so a question we often get is, like, what does a host family look like at AFS? And um, at AFS, really, there is no typical host family. Our host families are very diverse. They come in all shapes and sizes. You could be placed with a family with children, a family that doesn't have any children, a same-sex couple, a single parent. You could be placed in a family like with a family that's going to host two exchange students. So you'd be with another exchange student. There really is a lot of, variety in what the host family looks like, and we encourage everyone to, be open-minded and flexible about what that family might look like. Really, the only requirement is, that well, there are several requirements, but the big thing we're looking for is that they, are volunteers that genuinely want to get to know and host a student. Um, there is no requirement that the host family will speak English, so there may be varying levels of how much the family speaks English. And like I mentioned, there isn't any guarantee that you'd be placed with another child in the home. Um, it's also important to note that host families are located throughout the country. You can be placed anywhere in your host country. In It could be a small town, it could be rural, it could be a large city. There is really a lot of variety in the location. And it's also possible that you may be placed in multiple host different durations of a host family. So you could be placed either with like a welcome family or a half year family. So this would be a family that would welcome you for the first part of your program, for a couple weeks up to 3 months, and then you would transition into a more permanent host family. So there are different durations of host families as well. And you may stay with more than one host family during the program.
Yeah, and I think in the US, AFS hosts many host exchange students as well, and they have a similar conversation about what is it like, what will my host family be like when I come to the United States? And it's a very similar conversation. So it's really hard to describe what one family looks like in the United States. We all have different locations, backgrounds, stories. And so, as a really kind of human-centric program, it's a similar perspective for going to France. Or going to Thailand, you'll be really experiencing the people of that country, as opposed to perhaps like a representation of that country per se. So we're big believers in kind of the host families' connections to their local area teams. And being vetted for kind of having the right motivations as well. So that's a really important part. And along with that, a really important, I want to put like almost like a stop sign or something like that, but a really important thing to remember is that living with a host family is really different from, staying in a hotel. They want to treat you as a member of their own family, and not necessarily simply as a roof over your head. So, of course, we host families are there to keep you safe and care for you, but they're much more than that. So they are interested in learning about your culture, and they're also interested in sharing their culture. So that's a huge part of the AFS experience is having an open mind. Towards your host family. And when there are cultural differences, to communicate with both your host family and AFS, your liaisons, to navigate those cultural differences as well. But AFS has been running exchange programs just like yours for over 76 years. And this is one of the defining messages we really want to convey is that you'll want to treat your host family kind of in the same way that you would treat your own family members. And they might have rules that are more stringent than your rules at home. Maybe they have a curfew that you think is ridiculous. You would be expected to follow that curfew simply as their own son or daughter might follow that family rule. So it will be important to make sure that you have an understanding about what their family's rules and expectations are. To clean up after yourself, demonstrate that you are there as a kind of a member of the family as opposed to kind of a visiting guest. And those are kind of the keys to success for this. So You'll have a lot more training and orientations, particularly when you arrive in your host country as well, about the cultural nuances that might be expected of your host family. But if you can follow this one key of wanting to kind of treat them not as a transaction, but as as a part of your family that really wants to uh, connect with connect across cultures. So, um, wanted to kind of share that. So in this same idea, we want to ask you. So, what are some ways that you can think of for connecting with your host family? So, in your first couple weeks and months, you'll want to make sure you'll be asking yourself, how do I break the ice? What are some ways that I can connect with my host family and deepen that relationship? And so I want you to, we're going to ask you to chime into the chat. No, no bad answers here. And so what comes to mind for you? What are some ways that you think that you might be able to connect with your host family? All right, I see food. That's a great one. Everyone eats. They will love to know what you cook at home, and I would recommend with your family now, make sure that you have a couple recipes that you can make. And it's gonna be it will be funny to cook your host family a meal at some point. And I would also say I cooked my host family in New Zealand a meal, and it was perhaps one of my worst meals I've ever made. But we laughed over it. The cups were not measuring. It was horrible, but even through that culinary disaster, it was a success. So practice cooking right now. What as a way to kind of break the ice. I would also say being complimentary of food is goes a long way. In cultural situations that I've been in where I did not like the food, I would say things like, "Oh, thank you so much. I'm really full right now." It would in your in most cultures it is harder to say, I do not like this food, it is bad. That can be unintentionally offensive to people. So you just express your compliments. Thank you very much. But of course, if you're hungry, you also need to communicate that to your host family. We'll share a bit more about that. But being complimentary of food and then being kind of a participate in the food making goes a long way. I love what Cameron's putting. Making a scrapbook about America, Arizona, and me. I love that. You can sit down with your host family. You can describe what Arizona's like, what the United States is like. Naomi says, not stay in my bedroom. That is such a good piece of advice. It's so simple, but you will find yourself kind of like twiddling your thumbs at some point, being like, what should I do? And the answer to that is almost always go sit on the living room couch. Pick up a book, do nothing, but your physical body language is will communicate more than it ever has here in the United States. So if you are in the kitchen, if you're in the living room, you are communicating to your host family, hey, let's chat, let's do something. But of course, if you need a break and you need to stay in your bedroom and rest, of course that's okay. But that's a great piece of advice. Watch a sports game on TV or in person. You're going to France, so you will have a new sports team that you will root for. You'll figure it out, and that can be a really fun thing. Food is also go out and do something together. That's always great. And I would recommend, some host families are more homebodies. They might be like, our family doesn't really go out. Maybe when we do go out, we go to see our cousins for dinner on Sundays. And so you'll also want to make sure that you're cognizant of like, all right, what is normal for this host family? Or you can recommend something that you've always wanted to see, but keep it local as opposed to like if you were here in the United States being like, I want to go to New York City, that would be a little bit harder for them to navigate. But you could say, oh, in our town, I see that there is a famous thing. Can we go there sometime? Playing games, I love it. That's always great. Play the sport they play, board games, cooking. All of you've got this. These are great ideas. Ask what you should call them. That's a great one. What do you prefer to be called? That can be really important to break the ice. Music is great. What music do you like? What music do they like? Talk during meal times, cooking and walking, card games. This is terrific. You've all nailed it. These are excellent answers, and I recommend you go through all of the comments in the chat because this is really good advice from your fellow cohort. Our next question is putting yourself into your host family's shoes per se. So if you were welcoming an exchange student into your home into the US right now, what would you expect of them? So chime into the chat. What are some things that, if we're reverse engineering here, what might be some things that you might expect from a host family, and therefore maybe you can pursue that as well? I miss this jumping up and down in the yard together. I love that. Um, and kindness is a great one. Be respectful, open-minded. Open-minded is something that you'll hear repeated over and over and over at AFS. And one thing that can be really challenging for all of us to do is to not necessarily compare things as better or worse. So you might find yourself saying, "Wow, the coffee here is so bad." The coffee back home in Seattle is just way better. Although you might feel that in your bones, you'll want to be careful about making judgments, and it can be challenging to also navigate that situation. So I would just say that it's really important to be careful, not to say, "Oh, this thing is bad here." You can, of course, host a conversation, but you'll need to practice some indirect communication skills as well. Um, Also, you would expect to hear about their culture. So, hey, let me hear what it's like. What's it like in Chile? Like, tell me about that. I would love to hear what. Help with household chores. That's a really big one. A general piece of advice that we would give to you is do more chores than you're used to until you're told not to. So in some cultures, they would say they might say, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa. We don't do this. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, but don't do that." But you will need to kind of do more so that you can find that point. And I'll mention that it's not about the chores. It is about what you are communicating. So when you're sitting on the couch in the living room, you're communicating, "Hey, let's get to know each other." If you're doing chores, it isn't about just doing the chores. It's about communicating, "Hey, I want to help. I'm trying to put my best foot forward here." Willingness to try and learn new things. So you might have a piece of food put in front of you that it looks horrible or something. So it's about kind of saying yes when you feel that is both safe and comfortable to do so. We very much encourage you, as long as you feel safe and you feel comfortable, saying yes is a really good mindset for going into an exchange. Showing an effort to connect and learn, sharing meals, going on hikes, be present, enthusiastic. Being present is also a great one. So if you're on your phone the whole time, I mean, I'm guilty of doing that here in the US, but maybe it can also be an opportunity for you as well. So these are all really good answers. We could spend the rest of tonight just learning from you and hearing that. But I recommend as we go forward with the next slides, take a moment to review some of this good piece of it, these good pieces of advice in the chat, because this will be one of those ways for you to be considering how to, live with a host family. Okay, so a next part of the experience is the school experience. So the school experience um, is a wonderful part of about the AFS immersion experience. So, school is where most of your program will basically take place. So, when you are enrolled in a school that is normal and typical for your host country, it can be a challenge, but is also ultimately the most rewarding experience that most of our alumni will communicate. So, because this is an AFS immersion experience, that means that you'll be placed in a local high school that offers really the opportunity to connect with local peers in a really authentic experience. So, you won't just be taking classes with other Americans and never really interacting with the host culture. You will be fully in that host culture throughout the duration of the program. So this is where all the learning opportunities come, but it will also require your effort. So part of that effort with joining a school community will be to join clubs, say yes to opportunities, show appreciation to your teachers. So you'll be participating in a long-standing tradition of what we call public diplomacy. So this is where you are able to represent. You might be the only representation or the only person from the United States that your host school might actually get to know on a deeper level. So this is where you can also share your experience. And so a lot of that will be sharing your appreciation and displaying an effort for your school classes. So this means even though the school will be likely taught in the host country's language, and you won't have full comprehension for 1 to 3 to 4 months. Um, it will be about the effort that you display in your school classroom that will make the biggest difference. So, this is where we very much recommend you think about that aspect. It will be a transition for you, where here in the US, you have a subject and a course, and you're graded based on kind of your overall competency on given tests in a standardized way. For your school, they will understand that you are an exchange student, but they will also have the understanding that you are there to bring your very best effort. So particularly with the school, it's important to celebrate your small victories. It won't all come at once, but by showing your effort, showing up on time, completing your assignments, these go a long, long way. Otherwise, when you are in your school, as I mentioned, kind of this sense of public diplomacy, be prepared to present about the United States if called on. So for some of our AFSers in their first week, they were kind of put in front of the class and say, "Okay, where's your presentation about the United States?" Which can be a tall task. But spend some time now of like, if you're asked to talk about where you're from, what might you say? How might you respond? And so I can assure you, no one's expecting perfection, but it's a cool opportunity to think about how would you describe what your home is. We do recommend that you bring a laptop with you on program to help you do your homework. You will have homework. It may be more homework than you're used to here in the US. It might be less homework. It will depend on the school that you're enrolled in. And then finally, when you receive your host family information, you may also have your school information attached to it as well. You will be informed of of the school that you're enrolled in before you depart, but you will not be informed of the classes that you'll be enrolled in prior to your departure. So when you do arrive, you'll have an overview with your school and they will kind of they'll share what your schedule is, or if you do have options. And that's when you'll have your kind of your course selections once you're in country. So this would be another point to keep an open mind and consider kind of that school experience. Again, there are host school resources, and it's really important to do your research, Google school systems in your host country, and that will go a long way. So I want to turn it back to you. So you'll be attending a new school that is likely in a language that you don't currently know. What are some strategies to stay engaged and to demonstrate a sense of excitement and commitment to your teachers and your school and your student body? So take a moment. What comes to mind for you? What are some ways that you can show that you're engaged and demonstrating a sense of excitement? All right, I'm now scrolling through all these good answers about host families. Um, all right. Participating in activities, try to show results in classes where language is not so important, like math. Make new friends and join activities as well as participating in class. Joining clubs, that's great. I also say that here in the United States, we do have a culture of extracurricular activities that is typically different from most other cultures. So here in the US, um, starting from elementary school, middle school, high school, we typically have lots of scheduling after school happens. That doesn't always translate one to one with other host countries. So you might find that there are limited options. So, for example, you might be like, I've never played ping pong before, but ping pong seems like the only activity that's available to me. Play ping pong. It's not about, the act of playing ping pong, it's about meeting new people. So that's why we very much recommend it. And then how will I be able to do work and homework in a language I'm not fluent in? That's a great effort. So your teachers will understand that you are an exchange student. And so there will be some uh, depending on your teacher, there will be kind of differences there. So they won't necessarily assign schoolwork that's very, very complex to you if you're not able to necessarily express a sentence very clearly. But it will be about learning as much as you can during those classes. And an example that my colleague and my who is an AFSer to Germany, he said that for the first month or so in class in Germany, he understood very little, but he very much was studying the vocabulary. He would review the homework lessons with his dictionary at night. He very much immersed himself in the German language. He turned his phone into German. And then eventually one day, he heard something in his class where he thought he knew the answer. And so he raised his hand and he gave his best answer, and the classroom clapped for him. So that was an effort of saying just like, answering something that was pretty basic, but that is the sort of small victory that we very much encourage you to build off of. At points, it will feel impossible, but you'll want to keep going because there will be that moment where kind of the pendulum swings, and all of a sudden the language is starting to feel comfortable to you, and all of a sudden the coursework becomes more than just a language you don't understand. This is great. Communicate with peers if you're confused. That's a great one. Hey, can you help me out there? That's great. Write down words you don't know, ask questions. Sports is great. Being involved, friendly, and really trying as well as communicating, that's great. So, also, a general rule of thumb is that when you are in another country, make sure that your default first words out of your mouth are those of your host country, as opposed to English, of saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't speak that language." It's much better to fail, but try than it is to not try. So that's great. Awesome. So learn phrases from your peers, eye contact, pay attention, body language, sports and arts. This is really good information. Awesome. Awesome. Well, we could continue to go on. This will be an ongoing topic for your preparation. So we want to just get you thinking about this now. And of course, as you go on, we'll want to make sure that we can be a resource for you if you do have questions. So another important thing for you to consider and your families to consider is about school credit. And so we are unable to guarantee that credits will be accepted by your U.S. school. And so this is largely determined by your school in the U.S. So because AFS participants are placed in schools all throughout the country, we aren't necessarily able to guarantee that a standardized transcript will be provided to you. So, what should you do about that? So, if you haven't already, I very much recommend that you speak with your guidance counselor and understand what your US school needs are. And when you are abroad, it is very important to keep a record of all your classes, all the grades, and all the coursework you take while you're abroad. So, you may have a conversation with your guidance counselor that indicates that they likely won't accept much credit for your AFS experience. And a good way of navigating that is taking, summer classes when you return or customizing your future schedule to stay on track for any of your high school graduation desires. And then it's important to talk to the officials at your school to understand what sort of documentation is needed so that you can collect that in country. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see our tips for getting academic credit. So we want to make sure that this is one way that AFS can support you in this process. So this is a form that you'll have available to you. It's actually been emailed to you as a small link, but we recognize there's a lot of information we communicate. So we recommend that you do review that. But here you'll see this is a form that you can take with you. We recommend you print this out and bring it with you to your host country. And this is how you can complete it. So we recommend that you include your name, your high school in the US, and the below subject is a template for you to fill in while you are in country, so to speak. So this is not to be completed by your US school. This is to provide a standardized system for you to say, I took this course. This was the course detail that I had. I started on September 16th. I ended on December 16th. Each class was this many minutes. This is the grade I had, and this is, or if this is a pass fail. And then at the end of your school year or your semester, I would recommend that you have this signed by someone at your host school. And then when you come back to your US high school, you can share this form with them, which will serve as documentation that will help you. I would say that many of your schools will provide a transcript, and it is very important that you collect that transcript when you are in country because it is much harder to receive that transcript once you are out of the country. So when your program is over and you're an AFS alumni, it is a lot harder to obtain any sort of official documentation. So really, at the very beginning of your program, it will be helpful to have that understanding. And then, particularly near the end of your program, I would make sure that you have something physical, take a photo of it with your phone. But the gold standard would be something that documents the classes you're in, the grade that you received, if any, and those minutes and things like that. So this is an on-program form that we're providing. It is completely optional, but we're providing that to you in order to help. Okay. So we're jumping around, we're doing a lot, but I'm going to next hand it to Aaron to talk more about what we were just chatting about, the language acquisition on program.
Thanks, Parker. I just wanted to talk a bit more about language acquisition and kind of share some of our tips and recommendations for, picking up the language. Like Parker mentioned, you're going to be fully immersed in like a new language in your host country, both, with the host family and at school. And it's possible at the beginning you may not be able to understand very much. And first of all, I want to say that's completely normal. That's, a very common experience a lot of our students have when they start their program. Um, and it's important to note that language learning takes time, but you can definitely improve with, practice and continuing to use the language every day. Um, so a couple of our recommendations is first, we recommend that you start studying the language, right now, before departure as much as possible. There are a lot of great, resources online, for language learning, a lot of them free that you can check out. There may be some resources on the culture track that you can check out. But yeah, we recommend learning as much now because the more you learn now, the easier it will be for you once you start the program. Um, so get that Duolingo streak going ASAP if you haven't already. Um, some We also recommend, really relying on your host family and your peers as much as possible to help you with the language. Don't be afraid to
Yeah, I
ask them
do too.
questions. Be like, what is the word for this? How do you say this? Don't be afraid
It's
to,
just
reach out and ask
not know.
for help. Because they really can be the best teachers for you. Um,
Like,
And it's important to note that, your teachers at your host school and the volunteers and your host family, they all know that, you are new to learning this language. They don't expect you to be perfect right away. They're willing to work with you to help you improve your language. And, it's okay to make mistakes. In fact, you will make mistakes. You'll probably make a lot of mistakes. And it's kind of important to get comfortable with that, like knowing, not being afraid to like continue trying to speak in the language, even though it's not perfect. I think some people, they can be afraid to speak just because they know they're going to mess up. So it's important to just get more comfortable with the idea that, it's okay to not be perfect, especially right at the beginning. Um, and yeah, we just recommend, staying persistent, practice, practice, practice. You'll see that, hopefully as time goes by, you will start to slowly be able to pick up language and understand more and more because that's what immersion is. It allows you to learn the language because you're hearing it, learning it all day. Um, and it's important, Parker kind of already mentioned this, like, it's important to, just, think about the small victories, learning, just learning a few simple phrases and like practicing them and getting them right, that's a huge, step in the right direction. And sometimes, progress it can be really small at the beginning, but and you'll see, hopefully it will continue to grow. Um, yeah, and just take time. Just know that immersion can be really exhausting, especially at the beginning. You're not your brain is not going to be used to speaking in a new language at all times. So it will take some time for you to adjust, and that's okay. Um, and then finally, another recommendation I would have would be like to, like turn your phone into the language of your host family, turn your laptop into that. Start reading, try to, as much as possible, try to um, eliminate English where you can. Um, and be as much as you can immerse yourself into that language. Um, because the more you do it, the easier it becomes to learn the language. And similarly, like if you're talking too much with your family and friends back home, and you're spending all day talking with your friends, and not talking with anyone in the host country, then that can also kind of impede your ability to learn the language. Um, so those are some of our kind of tips and tricks that we recommend for gaining those language skills on program.
Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, and I'd say in the same spirit of doing something that you might not be playing ping pong, for example, even though you hate ping pong, um, your host family might really love watching telenovelas, soap operas. It might just be something you don't understand at all. And it's in a different language, so you don't even have any understanding of what's going on. And to you, it's just the TV on. But this would be a great opportunity to be like, I'm not going to watch this TV show because I'm interested in it, but I'm going to try and watch it to familiarize myself with that language. So that can be both kind of a bonding experience with your host family, but also a way to train your own ear. And then for the families in the call, I apologize, but sometimes it's great to also put post-it notes around your house right now. Try what that immersion experience is going to be like. If you have translate what mirror is, put it in your mirror. Translate what refrigerator is, put it in your refrigerator. Try to kind of learn a couple words that can help you around, kind of navigate in that way. Try it on for size. Awesome. So next we're going to talk about program support while on program because it's a really important part of the experience. So it's important to think about and prepare for the cultural adjustment cycle, which is a helpful way to understand both the emotional highs and lows that many exchange students experience while they're abroad, myself included. So this cycle shows us that emotions can change over time, from kind of the initial excitement of arriving to moments of confusion or frustration, and eventually to a sense of comfort and belonging. So these ups and downs are completely normal and are part of the growth that happens during an exchange. So it's important to recognize that each AFS participant's experience will be very unique, and that includes the length of time that you're abroad. So some of you may have peaks and valleys that happen at different times of the year, and it might not look like this at all for you. But um, there's really no right way to experience cultural adjustment. But generally, as you get to understand the culture, um, it can feel like ups and downs of greater and greater kind of magnitude. So, for example, after you arrive, you might feel really excited. Hey, I'm in Portugal. This is the best. I love it here. I had a pistachio nata, and this was the best food I've ever eaten in my life. My host family is wonderful. I'm so excited to be here. And then after 2 weeks, it starts to fade a little bit, and then you might see something online saying, "Oh man, like homecoming's coming up. I'm gonna miss that. Ugh." And then you start to grow a little bit of homesickness. But this is where we give you that encouragement to, stick through that. You'll find that once you kind of settle into the experience, you're like, okay, I can do this. I'm starting to kind of hear the language in a new way. I'm starting to understand students or my peers in a new way. Maybe I've made a couple friends. Maybe my host family did something really nice for me. I'm starting to kind of develop that relationship. So that relationship deepens in many ways. But this is often where culture shock might happen. Culture shock can be tricky. You kind of think it might be one thing, but it's another thing. But often it happens when you actually start to understand the culture. When I've had culture shock, I've felt like I've understood the culture and I disagreed with it. And to me, I was like, I don't like it. I understand it now and I don't like it or I disagree with it. And that was kind of low points in my experience where I felt like I actually was able to break through the surface and I didn't like what I saw, But then I realized that there was even more context to it. And once I took that next step, all of a sudden I was on the other side of the trajectory where I realized why that culture operated in the way that it did. I'd say during the holidays, if you celebrate any holidays in December, November, January, that can be a hard time to be away from your family. And so that can be often a low point when there's, more program ahead of you than that's behind you. But this is also when you really start to realize that, hey, I'm speaking the language. Hey, I know what it's like to be here. I'm starting to understand the culture. I'm starting to actually feel like I have real friends. This is when the culture learning happens. So we're sharing this with you because sometimes it can feel really challenging or impossible, but it's also part of the AFS learning design where you can really figure this out through experience. And this is what happens on immersion experiences where you're outside of your US bubble, you're outside of this American bubble, and you're really in it. And this is also another way that it might feel. Everyone, as I mentioned, everyone will experience a different type of experience, but as you are progressing, you're also adapting to that country. So it can feel a little topsy-turvy, but this is also when our AFS support system kicks in. So on those low points, or if you just feel like you are spinning and stressed out, this is also when we want to make sure that we are there to support you. So when you're in that low point, and you need that extra help, or if you just like me, you're like, I understand everything about this culture and I don't like it. That's when you should be chatting with what we call cultural informants or your host family, to learn more to deepen that experience. So, the support department operates for many things. I was just referring to kind of intercultural conflict, or the challenges of being in a immersion experience for a semester, trimester, or year. But support can look like many different things. It can respond to a medical need. It can respond to something that is more urgent. And so we have what we call kind of the chain of communication, which you can see here displayed on the screen. So once you depart for the program, your point of contact will transition from the study abroad team. So, Aaron and myself and the members of our team that you saw earlier tonight to our participant support and learning team. So for families in the call, the participant support and learning team will be your contacts. But for students, AFSers on the call, your your support people will be the ones that are on the ground with you. So your host family is someone who can provide you with support. A liaison is someone who's going to provide you with support. AFS staff members, AFS volunteers are there to provide you with the support. So, because there are multiple parties that you can contact for support, that's why we have this chain of communication here on our screen. So I'll begin kind of chronologically looking down like this from your perspective, the student. So here, in the chain of communication, your best resource for almost all things is directly with your host family. Your host family will understand the culture and is there to provide those cultural touch points for you. So let's say you are accustomed to eating, two sandwiches for lunch every single day, and you are simply starving, and you feel like you are just not eating enough food. The best way to address that is to speak with your host family and say, hey, would it be possible to have another sandwich made? Or maybe can I make myself another sandwich? I'm just really, really hungry. Is there anything that I can do? Um, and so that will be a lot more efficient for you than calling someone later on in this chain of communication and then having it trickle down here. So we have the student, the host family, who we want you to be in constant communication with. But sometimes the issue that you might have has to do with your host family, or you might not know how to phrase this ask you have of your host family or this challenge you have with your host family in a way that is culturally appropriate. So that's where your local contact person comes in here. You'll hear them referred to in with different names. We refer to them as liaisons, but in Germany they're called Abiturers. And there'll be other kind of names that your host country will share who that contact person is. But this contact person is there to be a cultural informant for you and is there to be kind of a coach for you to navigate these challenges. So, for example, I'm really hungry and I feel like I'm going to offend my family if I ask for more food. What would be what would be the right way to do this in Italy? And they would say, "Oh, yes, I would never say that. You should go this way, like you should phrase it this way." That's what a normal Italian teenager would do. Or how about I will talk to the host family because that's really the best course of action. So they're someone who is there to bounce ideas off of, to brainstorm, and to help you adjust. So if you have challenges with school, your host family is going to have the best advice for what you should do at school, but also your local contact person, your liaison is there too. For other issues too, you'll be hosted in an AFS area team of volunteers. So there will be more than one volunteer that's available to you. So you'll go to orientations in country. You'll get to know other volunteers that you can also go to. There may be more senior volunteers that you can also go to for questions. And then finally, you'll meet AFS partner staff who are always available to you. If you're not getting the answer that you would anticipate out of your liaison, or if you're not getting the answer out of that you would anticipate from your local support volunteers, you can always go to your AFS partner staff. But this chain of communication will be if there is something to report back to your family here in the US saying, I need another sandwich, and it's a really big deal. Although I would say it's a bad example because we wouldn't necessarily tell families in the US that a new sandwich has been made. But to use that as an example, your host family would be reporting back to their liaison. That liaison is also to the host family to make sure that the relationship is going well. That would then communicate with the AFS partner staff, let's say in AFS Argentina, and AFS Argentina would then communicate with the participant support and learning staff here in the US, who would then give your parents a phone call that saying you were really hungry and a new sandwich system has been implemented, so to speak. So this is the way that it would work. But also for families in the call, if you have a concern, you'll be working on the other side of that chain of communication. So you'll communicate with AFS-USA's participant support department, who will then communicate with the AFS partner staff, who will then communicate with the local contact person or directly with the host family or you yourself. So although this does look a little bit cumbersome, this is something that we've developed over our many years because when you are overseas, context is really important and you will be entering a really complex game of telephone. So we want to make sure is that we are aware of any cultural nuance and can provide that lens. And then also for families in the call, for example, it can create harm per se for you to reach out to from here to the host family and say, hey, you're not feeding my child enough. They need another sandwich. Although that is a great thing that should be communicated, it can have unintentional consequences of saying, "Whoa, how ungrateful is this family?" And and you might even put the right emojis, and you might try your best to make it a really kind, warm, thoughtful message, but it is really hard to deliver that message in a way that is frankly effective. So use AFS because we can do those hard conversations for you through this chain of communication. And then the last thing that I'll say is that the health and well-being of your safety is our number one priority. So if you ever feel that your safety or your health and well-being is in question, you can go to anyone on this chain of communication at any time. And we just want to make sure that you can just contact trusted adult. And any one of these members here could be considered a trusted adult. For situations that are emergencies, so typically a medical situation, um, all of you will have access to the AFS 24/7 365 duty officer system. This will be communicated multiple times prior to your departure. About a week before departure, you'll receive an automated email that provides you with all of the context that you need if you do need to contact our support department. This is for both families and students as someone that you can call and trust. We do ask that this line is protected so that it can be useful for students who are in medical emergencies or any emergency where your health, your emotional safety is being questioned. So it would be we would just ask that you treat it with that level as well. Okay, so you will have this more support conversations for parents in the call. We also have a parent specific call. We'll review a little bit about what we just reviewed from a parent perspective next week as well. But we want to get that conversation started about how our support system works and to at least provide that element. The next part is that within that support chain, we spoke about who a liaison is. So you'll all have a liaison, and Aaron is going to chat a little bit more about, who is a liaison, and what might you expect from your perspective.
Yeah, so Parker, as Parker already mentioned, is talking about the support process. Every participant on program is supported by a local team of volunteers, and every participant will be assigned a local contact person. Depending on your country, the name for the local contact person may vary. Some people call it the liaison, the mentor, the tutor, stuff like that. But um, they all kind of serve the same purpose. And the liaison is your first point of contact for support on program. So who are our liaisons? They do vary. What they look like can varies from country to country. Some they can vary in age. Some may be older. Some may be younger. Your relationship with the liaison can vary from country to country as well. Some liaisons, it might be a bit more of a formal relationship where they call and check in with you like every month, or others they may feel more of like an informal relationship where they're checking in with you. It may seem kind of more like an informal, friendly relationship. Um, you um, so you will receive the name and contact information for your liaison, usually pretty soon after you arrive in country. If there's ever a point where you're not certain who your contact person is, or if you're not hearing from them, it is really important that you reach out to your host family, another volunteer or staff member, so that we can get that straightened out. And like you said, is your liaison is in contact with the local volunteers in their community and with the staff of your AFS country. And the liaison is really meant for students. So it's for students to be contacting if they have any, questions or concerns. It is not for parents. Parents should not be contacting the liaison directly. Parents, if you have a concern, you need to direct those to AFS-USA and to our support department. Um, And then next slide. So what can your liaison do for you? So like I said, your liaison is really your first go-to person. They're there to act
We're back.
as a cultural informant and help you adjust to your host country's culture. So they're really kind of there to help coach you through the program, to provide you with resources, help you navigate any challenges that you encounter. So examples of what you could use a liaison for if you're not having, or if you're having difficulty with the language or not understanding something. If you have any questions about your host family or not sure, or you have questions about what some sort of behavior, something that they're doing at the house, you're not sure how to like respond to that situation. And they're also there to support you with school. So if you're having any difficulties with school, um, they can be there to guide you. Um, um, and so yeah, now we can kind of dive into an example of something that of a situation that maybe you would want to use your liaison for.
Awesome. So going to do a little role play here. So I want you to imagine that you're an AFS exchange student in Lyon, France, living with the Martine family. And from the start, they've been warm and generous. Madame Martine taught you to make gratin d'avoine. Lucas shows you the best bus routes to school, and everyone keeps saying, "Ici tu es chez toi." You're at home here. Over the first few weeks, you fall into your usual rhythm, coming home from school, dropping off your backpack and grabbing a yogurt, a slice of comté, or something, sometimes a piece of tarte aux pommes from the fridge. It's how you always refuel after school back in the US. But gradually, you start to notice things. A pause in the conversation when you open the fridge, a polite but tight smile from Madame Martine. Lucas jokes, "Tu as encore faim?" You're hungry again in a way that doesn't feel like a joke. No one says you're doing anything wrong, but the air just kind of feels different each time. And now you're kind of unsure why. So you were really tight with your host family for a long time, but now things are feeling just awkward. So after a few weeks of this quiet shift, you're feeling uncomfortable, confused, and not sure what's changed. So, what should you do in this situation? And we're going to launch a little poll right now. Um, so, what would you do? Would you do nothing? Just, I'm sure this will pass. Maybe call your folks back home and say that your host family is making you uncomfortable. Can they contact AFS to help fix this? Or maybe speak with your liaison, ask them what they might to do in this situation. Is this normal? Or enough is enough. Confront your host family and tell them that they're acting rude. All right. So looks like you are all doing the great there. So it looks like you nailed that. So you text your liaison, Camille. You explain that you've noticed some growing awkwardness with your host family in Lyon, especially around grabbing snacks after school, and you're not sure what's causing it. So she responds and sets up a short call with you later in that week. And during the conversation, she explains that in French families, snacking isn't common. So most groceries are bought with specific meals in mind. So taking food between meals, even something small, can feel like unexpected or confusing to the family. It's just not what they do. So it's not a personal criticism, it's simply a cultural difference. She gives you some advice. Ask your host family about la goûter. You can clearly tell I don't speak French, but if the typical French afternoon snack. Then she gives you other activities or like phrases that you might ask your host family, and then reassures you that talking openly will likely relieve the tension. It's okay to say this. It is culturally appropriate. So this is a quick example of like how you might use your liaison in a practical scenario. So just thinking about that also as a display of what that chain of communication looks like. Okay, so we just have a couple more minutes here on the call, and we'll mosey through these. So an important element about visas. So each AFS participant receives visa guidelines from our visa team. It will outline the specific steps required to travel as an exchange student to your host country. And so it's really important to read these instructions very thoroughly and carefully. Visa is the name of the game is dotting your I's and crossing your T's. So we work closely with AFS partners and embassies and consulates to receive updates about changes to the visa process, but we aren't able to apply for a visa on your behalf. But we will provide you with everything that you need in order to apply for your visa. So if you haven't received any guidance from our visa team, do not do anything until you hear that specific guidance. We also might be messaging you to say, get these documents ready, but do not apply yet. When your host family comes in, that's when you can apply for your visa, something like that. So it's important to get started now because you'll want to make sure you have everything ready for that visa to apply when you're able to. So an old adage is like, hurry up and wait. This is kind of how visas work. So you will not be able to depart the U.S. if you don't have a visa in hand. If there are visa issues, and they can be quite common, we do have pre-planned arrival dates to welcome you to the program once you've received your visa. So these are typically 2 to 3 weeks after your scheduled departure date. You will be informed on a case-by-case basis. So it is the responsibility of each family to apply for their own visa and to follow any specific instructions provided by that country's consulate, and to double check it within your own context. So if you speak with the consulate, they give you information that's different from the information we gave you, please contact AFS. Visas, the visa process changes year over year, and so it's very important that you act quickly on visas and you act as accurately as possible. And we are here to help you. It can be challenging, and visas are challenging, but you can definitely do it. Adriana and Sarah of our visas team are really wonderful. So please do let us know. We're almost at the end, so if you do have any questions, please start to include them in the chat. But one other thing that we really want to make sure that we highlight is the health form addendum. So this is required for all AFSers on year semester programs, and it is effectively to verify that there's been no changes to your health or well-being prior to your departure. So this is a form that will appear on your AFS dashboard that will basically be a short abbreviated physical. So this should be completed within 3 to 6 weeks prior to your program departure, or sent to us within those 3 to 6 weeks. And so please don't do this now because it is not necessarily relevant. But as you've completed your applications, in September through March and April, we just want to make sure that there's been no significant changes to your health. And if there has been any changes to your health or well-being, um, uh, um, please don't wait for the health form addendum to communicate with AFS. It's really important that if there's been any changes, that you communicate that to AFS as soon as you're aware. So if you've started new therapy, started new medication, these can be really important for us to know. Okay. Next, we have our language proficiency pre-assessment. So as part of your AFS program, we're able to provide you with the ACTFul assessment of performance towards proficiency in language tests, which can serve to demonstrate the language competency you earn while on program. So if you are going to a country that speaks Arabic, Chinese, French, Mandarin, French, German, Hindi, Italian, Japanese, Korean, Portuguese, Russian, Spanish, or Thai, you will be eligible for one of these pre-assessments. And it will appear as a to-do item on your AFS dashboard. So if you have, depending on your language ability right now, you may be asked to perform a pre-assessment. This would only be relevant if you have significant language skills. So if you've been doing Duolingo, and you are feeling pretty competent about that, you will likely not have to take a pre-assessment. But if you've been studying this language for 6 years, or 3 years, you're taking AP Spanish, you would likely be asked to do this. But this will be a benchmark for you. At the end of your program, you'll take the same test. It will measure your growth. And if you test to a certain degree, you can receive the seal of biliteracy, which is recognized by schools and colleges and can help you test out of courses and is great to have kind of on your academic transcript. Okay. Our last portion for the evening is travel, which I know is a really important thing. The at the top, I just want to mention that there will be a dedicated travel webinar that's specific to your flight. So our travel staff will review the nitty-gritty of your travel arrangements, but Aaron and I want to just quickly review a couple points that are relevant now. So our travel team will be has been booking international flights prior to your departure. And AFS staff and volunteers in your host country will greet you upon arrival. In some cases, your host family may also greet you upon arrival as well. So once you've been ticketed, you'll receive an email with your travel notification that will include really detailed information and resources about your travel. And again, there will be a dedicated webinar for your specific travel as well. For families, it's really important that that you consider that we will be booking you out of a point of international departure as a group. So everyone going to France will be departing on the same flight. I believe typically is out of New York together. So it will be your responsibility to get to New York, to use as an example. And our travel team will provide you with that kind of framework for where to book. So this will be something to plan for. And then once you get your travel email, you can then book and share your domestic travel with AFS. We also, I mentioned second arrivals within the context of visas, but as they relate to travel itself, so we strive to make sure that all students are placed on our on the date that has been communicated to you as well, or is available on our website or on your dashboard. And so this is our plan for any unexpected circumstances. So whether you have a visa rejected and you have to apply again, or there are some circumstances where host family information will come later than we anticipate. If they do come later than anticipated, you'll be in close communication with staff members, and we'll be providing you with the next arrival date, which would be considered our second arrival. So in those cases, rather than sending students without a vetted, confirmed host family, AFS offers a second arrival date as a backup option. So this allows extra time to find a thoughtful and appropriate placement for you, or to allow you to complete the visa process. So if a student has been placed by a certain cutoff date, which will be communicated clearly about 1 month before your departure date, or about 2 weeks before your scheduled departure, AFS will notify you and your family and reschedule your travel to that later date. And so students who travel on second arrival are welcomed with the same care and support as all others, just on a slightly adjusted timeline. So any AFSers from around the world who couldn't make that first arrival date will join you on that second arrival date. And then, of course, we'll be keeping you up if this is relevant to you. We'll be communicating very purposefully with your family in that case. And then finally, this is what the departure travel notification will look like. It will include information on who to contact in the event of emergency, as well as the duty officer system that I mentioned beforehand. And so there will be a takeoff booklet and the AFS dashboard. This will be really important to review in its entirety. So please do review the special instructions in the travel plan memo in this, as well as reviewing the luggage guidelines as well, because they will be they will cover very specifics here. Okay, so congratulations, you have now completed the whirlwind of tonight's webinar. So I really want to thank you for your time here. We have now completed our second of this journey of our pre-departure prep. So for next week, parents and guardians on the call, we'll have a parents and guardians only call with our participant support and learning team next week. On May 28th, we'll also have an alumni panel webinar with AFS alumni who can talk about their experience. We'll also have two optional webinars in addition to our travel webinars too. So now I want to make sure that if you have any questions, Aaron and I are here to chat. I recognize that the information we provided tonight has been, as I started at the top, too much and also too little. So if you do have questions, we're happy to speak to them right now. And if you have a very specific question about your own circumstances, please also feel free to chat within your application to your advisor. You can also email us at studyabroad@afsusa.org. And we really encourage you to give us a call too. 1-800-237-4636. That's AFS info extension 1. That will ring our study abroad team. Again, if you have visa questions, please direct those to sendingvisas@afsusa.org. If you have any finance questions, program fee questions, participant finance at afsusa.org. And finally, AFS sending travel with dots in between for travel questions. So that concludes our scheduled content. So now Aaron and I will look at the questions that you've been asking and we'll do our best to answer them. So thank you so much for your time tonight. I know this is a longer one, but I hope it's been helpful. Okay. So much good
Hello?
questions in here. Yes. Is there
Yes, I do have a question. Um, Instead of a laptop, would it be okay if I used a tablet? Would a tablet be okay instead of a laptop?
and you're going to Japan?
Yes, sir.
Is I would just if you're able to uh, complete your own homework assignments here in the United States on that tablet, then I would think that would work. Typically, we do recommend that a laptop, something that would be capable of completing homework assignments. But if you can complete homework assignments on that laptop, on that tablet, that would work. But I would just make sure you verify that.
Okay, thank you.
Of course, good question. Awesome.
On,
So if you,
I have a
yes.
question. So we just submitted Adriana's visa application online on Friday after 5 p.m. My question is, how long do we need to wait before making the in-person appointment? Because we're going to have to go from Oregon here all the way down into California for that particular appointment.
Yeah, yeah. Well, congrats on submitting that first part. I For visa questions, I can have our colleagues, Adriana and Sarah, get back to you with a confirmed answer. I want to make sure I give you the right answer. I'm not necessarily certain on that, so we can get back to you on that.
Okay.
We were wondering how often does a second arrival occur situation?
Yeah, so we had about I believe 10 about 10 students last year who were moved to a second arrival either for visa delays or host family delays. So it definitely does happen. And if it is something that may be relevant, we'll be communicating with you, particularly no later than August if we feel that there's a potential for that. So we just want to make sure you are aware of the contingency plans and the backup plans, and also that it is a possibility, but it is more on the rare side.
Is there someone that we can call and talk to about some of the visa questions we have? Because we're running into, we're filling out the visa application, but then it's asking us to upload these documents in order to proceed. And then if you try to just proceed without the documents, it says you can't go back and modify. So we were a little nervous to proceed, but we're not clear about what these where are these specific documents you provide or um and um and then I chatted or not chatted, but I emailed the visa or Sarah, and I was told to go ahead and make an appointment. We're also going from Oregon to California. I think we have to do that. So we're trying to get clear, and it sounds like we have to move fast.
Yeah, it is a little bit of that hurry up and wait, which can be aggravating. I would definitely recommend that you have a conversation with Adriana or Sarah about that technical side of things. But they would love to connect with you, especially if you have questions. And you can also call the number on the screen, 1-800 4636 extension 1. That will ring our entire team. But we can, of course, transfer them to Adriana or Sarah if they're both available. I'd recommend you call that number, or you can shoot an email to Sending Visas. Usually if you can take a screenshot, that can be really helpful for them. And sometimes these consulates, regardless of country, their websites can be a little bit clunky. I'm always a little bit surprised by that. But it is something that is a little bit outside of AFS's control. We can provide you with our best guidance based on how we've done it before. But things do change. And so we do, we are appreciative when you make us aware that something isn't meshing, if that makes sense.
Is
I would also recommend, just reaching out to Sarah and like asking if you can schedule a call with her, just because she works with all our year and semester students. So she's currently working with like 100 plus students. So she's definitely able to like have a phone call with you. She just might need some time to like schedule it.
Definitely.
Thanks.
I have a question for
Yeah.
so I have the question about like cell phone service. Like, would I need to get like a different service provider like when I leave, like to Thailand?
Yeah. So I would first chat with your current cell phone provider to see what options are there. In almost all cases, it will be very expensive to go with a US based provider. Sometimes, depending on your specific plan, they might say, oh, it's pretty easy. You can swap a SIM card. That is typically what most AFSers will do, is to have a local SIM card upon arrival. Based on, for Thailand, there might be, you want to make sure that you have the one that is relevant to the area of Thailand that you're located in that has service. So, for example, like here where I live, I would never get AT&T because there's no service, but everyone has Verizon. It would be similar to that in Thailand. When you do arrive in country, you'll be provided with instructions for how to get a local SIM card. So it would be important to have that conversation with your current cell phone provider to say, can my phone accept a new SIM card? Sometimes they can't, sometimes they can. Um, and I would be prepared to have some level of bridge connectivity for some time, but many of our students will also rely on Wi-Fi based services, so like WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger. If you're going to China, you must download WeChat. That works for many families, FaceTime, anything like that. But it would just be about also connecting with your local peers and your host family. Some students will get two phones, like one that's not a smartphone, but just a kind of a dumb usable phone. And that will be provided during your arrival orientation. So be prepared for that.
Thank you. I also have
Good
one
question.
question. Um,
Yeah.
so like for the money, so like do I have to like so I know there's fees to like transfer money, but like do I open up an account like or do you know like of an account or like bank here that I can open that doesn't have fees or
Yeah, so that's a great question. Um, each family will have kind of a different set of circumstances. So I would first make sure you understand what those fees are. So many students will have a discussion with your family about spending habits and things like that. Typically, when you take money out of an ATM overseas, they will charge you a significant fee, so to speak. Sometimes it's like $30 just to use your US-based debit card. But sometimes that can be the most appropriate spend. There, depending on your country, most of the time credit cards are able to be accepted without any international fee. However, it's really important that you as a family have discussions about proper use of a credit card, what a credit card means, and who's responsible for that. So some families have, my mom opened up a credit card in my name for my study abroad experience, and it really helped me because it built a long line of credit. But we had those conversations. I was like, this is what a credit card is, not free money. But it can be financially helpful because it will have a zero fee. Apple Pay, paying with your phone can be relevant. I'm not so sure how relevant that will be in Thailand. But in all of your program handbooks, at the very beginning of tonight's webinar, sorry for flashing through these. Um, we pointed out to the where the program handbooks are, and in the program handbook, so like the AFS Argentina welcome booklet, this is where AFS Thailand will say this is what we recommend for money. And so this is where I would recommend you consult for all people on program is to find this handbook, review the money situation, and then also we have resources in help and learning here about what we recommend for money. Does that make sense?
yeah, thank you so much.
Awesome. Awesome.
I
Here's a question. Oh, sorry.
yeah, I have a question. Um, my my daughter, her father lives in another state. We have four parents, me and my husband and her dad and his wife. Um, so to apply for the visa, when we finally get an appointment in Miami, do do does her dad need to be present as well? Like both parents? Like he travels and so do I, and like it's such a complex thing to try to schedule. Or would it be work if just one parent was there?
Yeah, I'm afraid that I know enough to provide convincingly incorrect information, so I would defer to our sending visas
Yeah,
to
I'll
ask
just
that
let you
question.
know that part. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that for the appointment yourself, what's more important is the paperwork that you show that you collect. Typically appointments are more procedural of like, I am a real living human being, and here is my application, as opposed to verifying, all people on that application are there. So that would be my general assumption is that only just one family member needs to be there. But I would just verify that with our visa team.
Yeah, I'll triple check. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for this
Awesome. Yeah,
webinar.
of course.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So, should I be worried if I don't have my host family yet?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would not be worried at all. It's very normal not to have a host family right now, and it doesn't mean that you are any more or less likely to get paired with a great host family. Each host country has a different process, and even when a host family is identified, it does take time for them to go through their safety regulations, their interviews as well. So the majority of you will receive host families around July or August. So I would not be concerned at this point. Host families do take time. And if you
Oh,
ever have questions, please feel free to reach out to us because we'll want to make sure we can give you as specific an answer as possible too.
okay,
Do-
thank you.
Yeah, of
There's one
course.
more question. Do we have to have the family has to be identified in order to get the visa, right?
It depends on what country.
France.
I believe
For
they,
France,
yeah,
yes, you need to have the host family to be able to get the visa.
yeah.
Okay, so we can't make an appointment then?
I believe in the visa instructions, the appointments are very hard to get for France, so they recommend to schedule them now. And I would double check on the guidance that's provided. So I think that is more of a strategy to get that appointment confirmed now and reschedule it if needed. But it will allow you to make sure that you have that appointment ready, with the assumption that the host family will follow.
Okay. All right.
And for others in the call, that would be advice only for France. Every country will have a very specific and unique visa process.
With the getting the visa for France as well, when we're doing it, it says we need the like documents to schedule an appointment, and then when we look when the documents will be sent, because they're ones sent from AFS, it says that they'll be sent mid-July. So how do we like schedule without the documents?
We're running into the same problem.
Well, I think it's just important that you need to have the documents for the appointment. You don't, and you need to be able to show them at the appointment.
So I don't have to upload them now. I can just schedule without them and then bring them later on.
Yeah, I mean I would confirm with Adriana sending visas, but that is my understanding of how the process works. But you should talk to Sarah about it.
I had a quick question based on something you said earlier, and I wasn't sure if I was just hearing it wrong. Um, but you said that most people travel out of New York City. Is that true for like everyone across the country? Because I live on the West Coast, and I guess I was assuming that I would fly out of Portland International Airport because that's closest to me. But is it likely that I would need to get myself to New York City and begin having that conversation about how to do that?
Yeah, so every country will typically leave out of a different airport. I used France as an example. I do believe France will leave out of New York. So you your family will need to arrange transit from Portland to New York. And then AFS will have your flight ready for you from New York to Paris. And so when you do receive your travel notification, it will provide a window of when you should arrive, and that way your family can consider the flight options.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome.
Is it is it possible to have a separate Zoom call with Adriana and Sarah for the French visa people? It seems like we have a lot of questions that need to be answered pretty quickly here.
Yeah, yeah. I would recommend that one thing about visas is that they're specific to your circumstance. So everyone will apply for a different consulate, and each consulate has a different requirement. So it is hard to provide overall advice. So if you do have questions, I really recommend connecting with them so that we can provide specific guidance for your circumstance, if that helps.
Parker, going back to the transportation issue, if it is a flight out of New York, say, does AFS allow us to connect so our child doesn't have to go pick up their luggage and then go switch and recheck it in and do that? Or how does that process work?
Yeah, so what you're describing is interlining. So like will the carrier uh, accept that? Typically that is not typically is not possible. Your child will be met at the airport and assisted with that process. But because they're on separate tickets, it is not always possible. However, our travel team will provide a recommendation that when you do check in to your domestic flight, you recommend with the airline staff, hey, may I interline my luggage to this flight? Sometimes they will say yes, sometimes they will say no. But we recommend you explore that option. But just to make sure I set realistic expectations, it's not always possible.
So you'll have somebody at the airport prior to departure to assist with this.
At the point of, if you're flying to JFK, we will have lots of AFS staff members who are there to meet your child at JFK.
Okay. Well, I don't, she's headed to Italy, so I have no idea where she's flying out of.
Awesome, awesome. I believe it will be a New York-based airport.
Okay. Thank you.
And I should mention that many of our flights do have AFS chaperones on them, so they will also be there to transit. Not all of our flights will have those, but we'll have all of your children will be met and escorted in the airport, and we'll also be connected via WhatsApp groups with our travel staff. We'll be monitoring all of your flights to preempt any delays and things like that. More information will go on the travel webinar specifically as well. Thank you very much for these questions. And I recognize it's getting late, so feel free to drop off if this isn't relevant to you, but I'm happy to stay on for as long as it's helpful for you. If there are any questions we haven't gotten to.
Do you know the host city, the city departure yet for China? Which city, in the States the people will leave from?
Typically, that will be through LAX.
How about for Chile?
I have a question.
Chile would typically be through Miami.
Okay, thank you.
My question would be is there a possibility to ask for a family with children? Because children are when I did the program, they are the ones who taught me the most, and I would like to have the same for my child.
Yeah, so it isn't always something that we can guarantee. And for our host families, you will receive kind of the host family application. If you were to reject a host family, that we would advise against that. but we would not be able to guarantee that we would find another host family for you in time for your departure. But we're not able to guarantee that children will be part of your host family. They are quite common, but we aren't able to guarantee it.
Can
So,
I?
you said we're gonna get like an application where we can talk about our family for them to see who we are, or that's already been done through the application process?
Yeah, so all of the work that your family has put into the AFS application, as well as your interview with an AFS volunteer, all of that is shared with AFS volunteers and staff members overseas to help inform the host family pairing process. Typically, host families will say, "Oh, I love that your family loves going for hikes. My family loves going for hikes too." Or we play soccer, you play soccer. That is typically kind of a starting point. But it isn't necessarily a process of matching like interest with like interest. Typically, host families will host for multiple reasons, but if there are, hopefully in your AFS application, you've shared a little bit about what makes your family, and we try and incorporate that into the host family pairing process.
Thank you.
Of course.
Do you know where, if the kid's going to Iceland, where they might fly out of?
Typically that would be out of a New York City-based airport.
Okay.
Question about any advice on things to bring or not to bring, packing.
I would say typically less is more. So things like clothing, you will find that you'll want to be wearing what your peers are wearing, which will likely be very different in Thailand than in the US. So I would reserve a little bit of space in your bag to allow you to maybe purchase some clothing that will make you fit in a little bit more. So less is more, but I would make sure that you do have some packing essentials. Make sure that you have both a converter or a charger for your electronics. I would make sure that you do have a host family gift. And we do have more information that about packing in those original handbooks, which I'm failing to give really good advice on. But I would say if there's anything perishable that might break, I would recommend against that. And if there's something that's very valuable to you or sentimental, if it were to get lost, I would perhaps recommend against that. Um, so hopefully that gives a little bit of a starting point. Awesome. Awesome. Well, I really appreciated everyone's time tonight. Thank you for all of these questions. I know that we likely didn't get to all of the questions here, but we will have more opportunities to connect. So this isn't going to be the only time that we will be preparing you for your experience. But we did want to connect with you to at least get you thinking about between now and your upcoming departure. We're very excited for your AFS experience. We want to make sure that we're available to you. So if you do have those questions, please reach out to the numbers and contacts on the screen. We'll make sure that we can get back to you on that. But otherwise, we very much thank you for your time tonight. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to connect. My name is Parker Allen, joined by Aaron. And thanks again. We really look forward to being in touch with you and your families and your upcoming AFS journeys. So thanks again, and bon voyage for now. So we'll connect later. Thanks everyone, and I hope you have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.